Okay, let's unpack this. Sometimes we fall into this trap of thinking knowledge just moves straight ahead, like brick by brick.
Right. Linear progress.
Yeah, but what if it's more fluid? What if some ways of understanding the world kind of spiral back, repeating across time and cultures?
That's a great way to put it. And what's really fascinating here is this concept you're hitting on, the formal doctrine of signatures, that Renaissance idea, like lungwort looking like lungs.
Right, the classic example.
Exactly. That wasn't some sudden European invention.
Mm.
The sources we're looking at show its roots. These proto-signatures were actually much, much older
Yeah.
and more global.
Ancient intuitions. So this deep dive isn't just about the later doctrine, but about, well, journeying back through history across continents using these sources
And
to find the earliest whispers of this idea. How did different ancient people look at nature's form, its look and feel, and find clues for healing, for life?
precisely. Our mission is to explore these glimpses, this like pattern-seeking impulse, this desire to read nature as it popped up in classical traditions, ancient Egypt,
Sure.
sophisticated Eastern medical systems, and indigenous knowledge too.
All over the world.
Yeah, we're tracing a really deep human thread here.
Okay, let's jump in then. First stop, the classical world, Greece and Rome. You really can't talk ancient plant medicine without mentioning Dioscorides, right? His De Materia Medica, around 77 AD.
Absolutely foundational. I mean, it was a pharmacopoeia for centuries. And Dioscorides, he was very empirical, really focused on what he observed plants did.
Practical.
Very practical. But even within that framework, you see these subtle hints.
Hints of finding meaning in form, even if it wasn't the later looks like an organ thing.
Exactly. He didn't just note the effects. He wrote down taste, color, form, and importantly, its growing environment. And he made connections.
Connections that feel like an early kind of signature.
Yes, but maybe more of an environmental signature. Like the source points out, he might prescribe a plant from a wet, marshy place for conditions involving, excess bodily fluids.
Ah, so connecting the habitat nature's form in a broader sense to a human condition, reading the environment.
Exactly. It's reading the environment as a clue.
That's a neat twist on form. Okay, and then there's Galen. Huge figure in Roman medicine with his humoral
All
theory.
right. Galen's whole system, very complex, all about balancing those four humors.
Yeah.
Blood, phlegm, yellow bile, black bile.
Balancing act.
Yeah. And while it was very physiological, his framework needed ways to classify treatments, and herbs were crucial. So he categorized plant properties hot, cold, wet, dry, based on observation.
And these properties could then map onto the humors to sort of rebalance things.
Precisely. Now, the source doesn't say Galen directly used appearance to decide if a plant was hot or cold,
Mm-hmm.
but his system, correlating observable qualities like taste, maybe how it felt, maybe even visual cues linked to heat or moisture, correlating those with internal effects in the humors, it shows that same underlying drive, that need to find correspondence between the natural world and human health. It's part of that same intellectual lineage.
So less visual mimicry, more systematic mapping of properties. And the Romans, they mostly took this Greek knowledge and ran with it,
Yeah.
collided it.
Largely, yeah. They were brilliant organizers, applicators. Their worldview definitely had room for natural sympathies, these connections, but their medical texts focused heavily on classifying and using remedies. They inherited that Greek empirical base, but still, held a place for those natural connections implicitly.
Okay, so leaving that empirical angle of the classical world, let's jump back further. And across the Mediterranean, ancient Egypt, their understanding of the body was pretty amazing, partly from mummification, right?
Incredible. And their whole world, their cosmos, was just infused with meaning. Healing wasn't separate from beliefs about gods, cosmic cycles, the meaning in objects.
Right, not compartmentalized. So how did plants fit into their healing?
They were woven right in. Remedies and their uses were linked to those bigger symbolic and cosmic ideas. And crucially, the symbolic appearance of a plant held profound meaning.
Symbolism as a kind of healing signature. Tell me more.
Well, the sources give examples like the lotus. It closes at night, reopens in the morning, right? So associated with rebirth
Okay.
and used in healing related to renewal.
Hmm.
Or papyrus tall looks vital, linked to vitality itself. Now, this wasn't the European looks like a lung signature.
Definitely not.
No. But it was absolutely a system where a plant's visible form, its life cycle, how it behaved, held deep, resonant symbolic associations. And those were powerful in healing, It's a potent way of reading nature's form, but for symbolic, spiritual truth, not just empirical properties.
That's such a different way in from property mapping to symbolic resonance. Shows how varied this reading nature impulse can be. Okay, speaking of varied systems, let's head east. Traditional Chinese medicine, Ayurveda. Now, the source material is really clear here, and we should be too. These are not the European doctrine of signatures just showing up somewhere else.
Vitally important point.
Mm.
TCM and Ayurveda are incredibly sophisticated whole medical systems, developed independently, complex theories. To just lump them in with the European idea is, well, it's a big misunderstanding. Disrespectful even. They don't primarily rely on that kind of visual resemblance.
Okay, got it. Loud and clear. But there's still that underlying idea finding correspondence in nature's form just through a completely different lens.
Precisely. Their whole philosophy is holistic.
Yeah.
The universe is interconnected. And within that, plants have properties that correspond to the body, but the signature is read differently.
How does TCM do that? What's the lens there?
TCM is built on concepts like yin and yang, the five elements: wood, fire, earth, metal, water, and qi, the vital energy. Everything fits into these elemental relationships: the body, organs, emotions, herbs.
Everything corresponds. So how do you read an herb in that system?
The source points to taste and color as key signatures in TCM. For example, a bitter taste. That's a signature of the fire element, associated with cleansing, cooling, often used for conditions linked to the heart, which is also fire,
Wow.
or a green color that's a signature of the wood element, indicates support for the liver.
Ah, so the signature isn't the shape mimicking an organ. It's the taste, the color, maybe how it grows, indicating its energetic properties, its elemental link.
Exactly that. You're reading the visible or experiential stuff, taste, color, texture, growth pattern, as clues to the plant's energetic influence,
Yeah.
how it affects the body's elemental balance and qi. It's systematic, it's reading nature's properties, just not based on shape likeness.
That really flips our usual visual idea of a signature. What about Ayurveda? Similar principles, different system.
Ayurveda from India works with the three doshas, Vata, Pitta, Kapha, and the five elements. Similar elemental thinking to TCM, but yeah, distinct system. Herbs are understood through properties like rasa, taste, virya, potency, like heating or cooling energy, and vipaka, what happens after digestion.
Rasa, virya, vipaka. Okay. And how do those link back to the plant's form or maybe where it lives?
These qualities, taste, energy, effect, they're seen as expressions of the plant's own elemental makeup and how it interacts with its environment.
Yeah.
So again, not a visual organ signature, but observing the plant.
Right.
Where it grows, its taste, feeling its energy signature, the virya, these are all read as clues. Clues to how it might affect the body's doshas and elemental balance.
Can you give an example?
Sure. A warming, pungent herb, like ginger perhaps,
Mm-hmm.
it might be classified as having a virya linked to fire.
Makes sense.
It would be used to balance kapha or vata doshas, which can show up as coldness or stagnation.
Hmm.
The pungency you taste, the warmth you feel, those are the signatures of its energetic nature, derived from observing its properties. It's deeply holistic, correlating nature's properties to body effects, echoing that same spirit of finding meaning, just in its own complex way.
It's just fascinating how different these systems are, yet they share that impulse, finding systematic connections. Okay, let's widen the lens even more. Beyond these formalized written traditions, indigenous knowledge systems all over the planet.
Yeah, this takes us to cultures in the Amazon, North America, Africa, Oceania, countless places. Their knowledge is built on thousands of years of incredibly close, direct observation and living with their environments.
So how did they find guidance in nature for healing or other uses?
The sources suggest it was often, well, a multi-layered reading. Not just physical appearance, though that could play a part. It might include the plant's or animal's behavior.
How it acts.
Yeah, or its preferred habitat, its role in the whole ecosystem, even its place in myths and stories.
So a much broader definition of signature than just shape. Got any examples from the sources?
They mention things like maybe a root that looks a bit like a human figure being used for overall health.
Mm-hmm.
Ginseng is often brought up here, but with a big caveat.
Right, got to be careful.
Exactly. Its power is understood way beyond just looking like a little person. Other examples, maybe a brightly colored flower being linked to spiritual experiences, or a tree that weeps sap.
Weep sap.
Yeah, like resin or gum, used in practices for emotional release or cleansing, that kind of connection.
Wow. Finding meaning in process, in behavior, not just static form, that feels very deep.
It is. It's a much more dynamic, integrated way of reading of the world. And the source rightly warns us here, don't oversimplify or just grab bits of these traditions. Each indigenous system is unique, complex, deeply spiritual, needs respect.
Absolutely.
But looking across all these diverse examples, you really do see that golden thread you mentioned earlier.
That underlying human tendency.
Yes, the universal drive to look at the world around us, its forms, its qualities, its actions, its stories, and find meaning, find guidance, whether it's empirical observation or symbolic links or elemental patterns or this deep ecological spiritual knowing. That impulse is there. These were the real proto-signatures weaving through all of human history.
Okay, let's shut and pull this incredible journey together. We've seen these echoes everywhere. Dioscorides hinting at habitat and health, Galen mapping properties to humors, the powerful symbolism in Egypt, the energetic signatures in TCM and Ayurveda, taste, color, potency, and then the really broad, holistic readings in indigenous systems tied to ecology, spirit, story.
And what just jumps out, when you look across all of them, despite such different ways of thinking, empirical, symbolic, elemental, spiritual seed, there's this persistent, deep human habit, seeing the natural world not just as stuff, but as, well, a source of information, a book you can read.
We look to nature's form, its patterns, its ways of being for clues. About us, our health, our place in it all.
It really reveals something fundamental about that ancient desire we have to find patterns, find meaning. It's universal, long before any formal doctrine.
Yeah.
And it really challenges maybe our modern tendency to see nature just, mechanistically, through a purely reductionist lens. These old ways remind us there are so many ways to find meaning and connection with the living world.
So here's something for you, the listener, to maybe carry with you after this deep dive. Next time you're outside, just look at something simple. A common tree you walk past, a feather on the ground, even just water moving in a puddle.
Yeah. And just take a moment. Think about how those different ancient lenses we talked about might see it. How would Dioscorides or Galen try to classify its properties? What elemental links or energies might TCM or Ayurveda find? What story or symbolic meaning could an indigenous tradition see in how it looks or acts?
What is trying to see that one thing, that tree, that feather through all those different eyes reveal, not just about the past, but maybe about our own way of seeing nature now? Are we still looking for signatures, or have we maybe lost some of those older ways of reading the world?